A legal battle beginning at the beginning of July came to a quick decision. In fact, the judge stopped the proceedings before even going to a trial. Babe Vote filed a lawsuit against the state of Idaho after passing a pair of election integrity laws. Those laws removed student ID from the list of acceptable documentation to vote in Idaho. And the law requires anyone registering to vote to provide proof of residency to the county clerk's office. Now, Babe Vote alleged in their lawsuit that these laws discriminated against young people, high schoolers. The Attorney General's office says that their complaint doesn't have legs to stand on. Here's Andrew Bartline.
Participation at the voting polls. It's hardly an option for a select some.
It's just one of the easiest ways that you can make your voice heard in the political system.
Now made a little harder.
Yeah.
Just ask.
I think
Soumya Sarin.
this makes it really hard for organizations like Babe Vote to help people complete voter registration because we can't collect and turn in people's documents to the county clerk's office.
Babe Vote is a youth voting advocacy group, and they say 2 new Idaho state laws are stopping them from registering late teens and early 20s on the voting rolls.
So it's harder for us to guide people.
Specifically because student IDs are no longer an acceptable document to vote, and those clipboards used to register new voters at events, those are no longer enough on their own either. Because unlike registering at the clerk's office, those clipboards loopholed a proof of residency.
So they just wanted to make it all consistent.
Idaho Attorney General Raul Labrador defends these laws.
You have to be a resident of the state of Idaho to vote.
And his office successfully preserved their position in district court.
And the judge agreed with us that there was not a claim that should go to trial in this case.
Babe Vote alleged the new laws discriminated against young people. Student IDs are popular and accessible for their demographic.
Most people receive a student ID when they're enrolled in high school or college. Other forms of ID, like a driver's license, they have a couple more extra steps that can become a burden to some young people.
But what's called a burden for some is a legal protection to others.
Well, this is actually something that the Constitution of Idaho specifically commits to the legislature and says this is for the legislature to decide. If that's the case, then the legislature should have, fairly wide range to do anything that's rational.
Why is it rational to stop student IDs from being accepted at the polls to vote?
There's no standard for student ID. A student ID that's made by my kid's high school is going to be different than the student ID made by U of I. They're going to have different standards for what you have to submit to get them.
And often, proof of residency and exactly where that residency is not part of the student ID process.
So we need to make sure that your vote is as protected as my vote. If I allow you to cheat in an election, then that's doing away with my vote.
All of these laws are kind of non-issues. They're like solutions to problems that don't exist.
When I look at the statement of purpose on House Bill 124, it says 104 voters used a student ID in the 2022 general election.
Yes.
104, what does that tell you?
It's not a lot of people.
But it's not zero. And for them, the new law created a free state-issued ID to ensure people who can legally vote can get the documentation to vote.
The state bent over backwards to give people the opportunity to vote in the state.
Ruling these claims for dismissal.
Yeah, I'm an attorney with Perkins Coie.
It's a loss for Matt Gordon and Babe Vote.
We're disappointed by the decision, and we are, thinking about and evaluating what the next steps will be on this case.
Because the answer isn't enough for this some, where the barriers and burden are still in their way.
It requires applicants to submit a certified birth certificate or a current passport, which not everyone has a current passport, and the applicant can't have held a driver's license for the last 6 months. So the free ID is not a solution to most people.
Babe Vote's attorney tells me he's currently seeking all his options right now. He doesn't believe this fight is over quite yet. And part of that could be an appeal process. Again, he's looking through all his options currently. And Joe, the state legislature does have the right to regulate this. That's part of what the judge decided. And so it is legal to regulate things that are reasonable. And so that was part of the question that I asked the AG's office is, why is this reasonable? Well, they say that those student IDs just don't have to have proof of residency tied to them, which ideally, people should be voting in the district of which they live.
And I know there are maybe people watching this story saying, you know, well, how could I go get one of those free state IDs? And I know we didn't have time to get into it in your story today, but if you go to ktvb.com, our team has done some really lengthy coverage on this issue, and we have a whole guide on how you can go get one of those free state IDs if you are an affected student.
Yep.
So, all right, Andrew Bartline reporting for us here on the 208. Thank you, Andrew.